Welcome to Spooky Times with Eric D. I am your host, Eric D., so that checks out. Listen, it's been a minute since we had a brand new episode, like an episode where I sat down and did research and then presented it to you guys, but this is one of those episodes, so be excited. This is like a big comeback, I guess, after a little bit of time off. Accidental time off, but time off nonetheless. Anyway, it's good to be back with you guys. I'm excited to bring you this episode. I think it's going to be a good one because, of course, it's based on a segment from Unsolved Mysteries, one of my favorite shows and yours. Not the new one that they have occasionally on Netflix now, but the original Unsolved Mysteries with the main man, Robert Stack. By the way, if you haven't listened, Unsolved Mysteries also has a podcast, which I actually enjoy better than the TV show that they do now. So you can check that out. But of course, it's the classic episodes of Unsolved Mysteries with Robert Stack, available on every streaming service pretty much, and even on YouTube, some seasons for free. So you can check that out. However, the story that we are going to be discussing tonight is not available on the streaming services, no matter which one you're using. It's been edited out of the episode that it was on, and it was on episode number 4 from season 1. That's the one where Robert Stack is walking around the Queen Mary. And if you've paid attention to the show, then you will know that I do not like ghost stories set on boats or trains, and I'm weary of plantation ghost as well. For some reason, those ones just appeal to me less, but this is a good ghost story. It's got no boats, except aside, of course, from the fact that, man, I am mumble mouth. Well, you know what? It's because it's 4:49 a.m. as I record this episode. So let me try that again. There's no boats on this episode, except, of course, Mr. Robert Stack walking around the Queen Mary as he talks about this family, which is the Tallman Haunting. It's a very classic episode from Unsolved Mysteries. I think any of us that were ghost enthusiasts watching Unsolved Mysteries in our childhood, or even if we were older, will remember this story with or without it being available on streaming. And of course, you can't find this particular segment on streaming, but you can find it on YouTube and other places on the internet. So it's around. You'll be able to see it if you want to. And I'm going to be using some audio from the show so you can hear from the Tallmans directly, words from their very mouths. So don't take my word for it. Before we begin, I want to tell you about a possible paranormal encounter that I had in New York City. But before I even tell you that, I want to do a little commercial for myself. So, we are Spooky Times with Eric D on Instagram, and you should follow us there, because if you do, then you can see pictures from New York. I think I posted some from there, and all kinds of goodies, including pictures from this episode of Unsolved Mysteries, which you can't see on the streaming services, and also some other interesting photos that I found online, which I'll be talking about later on. So there's a good reason to join our Instagram page. Follow our Instagram page. You know what I mean. At Spooky Times with Eric D. You can also find us on Facebook at facebook.com/spookytimes with Eric D. And we have our closed group, the Spookaroos. Not gonna lie, it's mostly inactive now, but every once in a while somebody will pop up and say something interesting and spark a little talking point for everybody. And of course, the main thing I want to plug is the Patreon. Now, Spooky Times with Eric D is a Witchfinder production, so if you go to patreon.com/witchfinder, then you will be able to become a true blue Spookaroo. There are 3 tiers to join, and you don't really get much more content if you join at the higher tier, but you do get a bigger spiritual thank you from me. And hopefully some more goodies coming down the line, but I always post at least a few times a month, and sometimes more than that. I do photo dumps of any kind of trips that I do, spooky trips. And I also, for example, just recently posted the Halloween episode of my public access television show. Not mine alone, but I was kind of the writer/director of sorts, which at the time, trust me, was not really a great thing, but it's still interesting to see because it was the first time I ever went to Salem, Massachusetts. And, well, I don't want to age myself too much, but let's just say this TV show was made when I was in high school, And it was not in this current century. Just barely, but it was not in this current century. So you can check out the regular version of that, but I'm also going to be posting very shortly a commentary track version where I do my modern day commentary over the old episode. I'm also just today, very shortly indeed, going to be showing you around my Christmas tree because I got a couple spooky ornaments that you guys might like to check out. So that kind of thing, and hopefully down the line some exclusive episodes of the podcast that you can only hear on Patreon, and other goodies to come in the future as well. So that's patreon.com/witchfinder. Okay, so I recently went on a trip with a certain young lady to New York City to attend some Broadway shows. If you listen to the show, you know that that is my background. I'm a theater guy. Try not to hold it against me. Now, we, spent the night in New York City, and we stayed at a hotel called the M Social, and it's right in Times Square, like just steps away from Broadway, and right in the heart of all the touristy stuff in New York City. So, for us, it was great because we were there for theater, and so we were close to all the theaters. But on the last morning that we were there, a certain young lady and I decided that we wanted to have some New York City bagels. So I said, don't you worry about it. You stay here, chill. I will go down and I will find us some bagels. So that was my plan. So I'm walking down the hallway. This is on the 20th floor of the M Social Hotel. And I'm getting on the elevator, and as I'm getting on the elevator, I see like a shadow of somebody coming down the hall. It was kind of like like there was a long hallway, and then a short little turn, and then another longer hallway down to the elevator. So I kind of on the wall where there's like that short little turn, that's where I saw the shadow of somebody coming. And I got on the elevator, and I said, I should hold the door for the next person. Even though it's COVID times, I'm still polite, and of course I'm wearing my mask. So let me hold the door and let this person get on the elevator, because why else would they be coming down the elevator hallway? So I hold the door, and I look out to let the person know, hey, I'm holding the door for you, and nobody there. Now, I didn't get too freaked out because for a couple of reasons. Well, one, I didn't see an actual person. I just saw a shadow. So I said, well, I did see it kind of sort of out of the corner of my eye, so maybe it was my eye playing a trick on me. Could have even been my own eyelash, maybe, Also, that little short hallway, at the end of it, there was a window. And it was morning, so maybe a bird flew by and, I saw the shadow of a wing or something like that. Or, something just flew by the window, and that's what caused this little shadow on the wall. Could be any number of things. Or could be a shadow person. Or could be a ghost. We didn't have any other unusual things happen in the hotel room, but then I was interested. So when I got home, I did a tiny little bit of research and looked up the M Social Hotel. I didn't get into the big history. I'm sure it was something else before it was M Social and all that stuff. I didn't do a very deep dive. But I found out that there's a Google review, and the first thing it says is, it's a nice place, but it is haunted. They specifically talked about the 4th floor being haunted. I don't know. Didn't see the 4th floor. Didn't check out the 4th floor. Didn't know that it was supposed to be haunted before I went in there. But I had my little incident on the 20th floor. So, again, could be any number of things, including non-paranormal explanations, but who knows? Maybe I had my very own shadow person or ghostly encounter. But that's not the ghost story we are here to discuss tonight. We are here to talk about the haunting of the Tallman family. Now, this is a bit of a wild story, and I think part of what makes it so memorable to Unsolved Mysteries viewers is that it involves what is normally such a benign object, like the inciting object that the family brings into this home that causes all this grief, in their own minds anyway, is such a benign object. It's something you would never think about being haunted. So that's part of it. And also there's a fire witch involved in the story, and that is pretty memorable as well. A witch who is literally on fire, terrorizing the children and the adults in the house. So we're going to play this story, but I gotta be honest with you, the first few things that happen, like any good horror movie, I suppose, the first few things that happen aren't all that scary. In fact, they're a little bit silly or goofy, perhaps. But I'm going to add some musical stings for a little bit of comedic effect, but also to kind of help the story along. Listen, you know how we do here on Spooky Times. We don't take things too mushmouth again. It's 5:02 a.m. now. We don't take things too seriously. This is the Irreverent Paranormal Podcast. So, here we go with our story of the Tallman family haunting. In April of 1986, Alan and Debbie Tallman, along with their 3 young children, Chris, age 7, Tessa, age 2, and Tiffany, age 1, these are not the children's real names, by the way, moved into a 4-year-old home on Larrabee Street in Horicon, Wisconsin. The family considered it their dream home and settled in to make it their own.
Well, yeah, it was our dream house because, it was something that we figured we were going to be there for a long time, and it was a dream house.
Alan had taken a job as a shift supervisor at a manufacturing plant, which occasionally required him to work until 2 a.m., while Debbie stayed home to care for the house and the children. At first, everything seemed to go according to plan, until, that is, February of 1987, when the Tallmans accidentally made a diabolical purchase from their local thrift shop that would literally haunt the family in the months to come. The sinister item in question was, as I'm sure you've guessed by now, an evil bunk bed. The Tallmans were still in the process of setting up the girls' rooms where they intended to put this bunk bed, so Alan stored the bunk bed in the basement, and it didn't take long before the family began to notice something strange was going on. Within days, all the children fell ill. Alan and Debbie were surprised by this, as, until now, all the children had been very hardy. Suddenly, Debbie, it seemed, had to bring one or more of the children to the doctor, sometimes multiple within a week. In May, the Tallman family brought the bunk beds upstairs, placing it in the room next to where their son Chris slept. That night, as Chris slept, his radio turned on by itself and started randomly switching between radio stations. Chris turned to look at the radio and saw that the dials were frantically moving as if manipulated by unseen hands. Chris ran out of the room and to his parents in the living room. But Debbie and Alan, not believing that such a thing was possible, assured Chris that it was just his imagination. They removed the radio from his room and sent him back to bed. But that was just the beginning of the diabolic events in the Tallman household. There was far worse to come, like the incident with the paintbrush. One day, Alan was doing some painting in the basement. Debbie called him up for lunch, and Alan, figuring that he'd be right back to work after he finished, rested his wet paintbrush across the lid of the open paint pail. Upon returning to the basement after lunch, he discovered that the paintbrush was sticking out of the paint pail, bristles up. The handle was submerged in the paint.
I figured there was something strange why this happened, why the brush got into the paint pail, but I wouldn't accept that my house was haunted.
The Tallman's 2-year-old daughter, Tessa, who had been sleeping in the bunk bed, awakened Debbie one night saying that she was afraid of the witch with red eyes who sometimes hid behind her bedroom door. She also mentioned having visions of a fire breaking out in her room. Debbie again chalked up these sightings to a child's imagination and fear of the dark. She assured Tessa that it was just her imagination, and there was nothing to be afraid of in the dark. But about a month later, Chris, who allegedly had not known about his sister's sightings, began to tell Debbie that he had seen an old woman standing near his bedroom door.
He had said, "Mom, I saw an old lady standing by my door." And he said that she glowed like fire. At this point, I began to think that our house was probably haunted.
Debbie and Alan turned to their family pastor, Wayne Dubretz. He agreed to visit the home. As soon as he walked in the door, he claimed that he could feel an evil presence. Whatever was troubling the Tallman household, he said, must have come from the devil.
I believe that my initial analysis of the entity being in the spiritual realm, the occult realm, the demonic, if you will, was accurate. And I still believe it's accurate.
Pastor Wayne had known the family for more than a year when he visited their home, and he knew that they weren't exactly regular church goers. He encouraged the family to attend services on a regular basis to gain God's favor and to help combat the evil spirits. It didn't work. The Tallmans began to hear ghostly voices throughout the home. Doors would swing open and then bang closed on their own at all hours of the night, and the children continued to see the burning witch in their bedrooms. Because of this, Chris decided to stop sleeping in his room. Instead, he began to sleep in the living room. This turned out to be of little use as well. The week before Christmas, 1987, Chris awoke in the living room and again had a terrifying vision of the burning witch. He screamed for his parents, who came running, only to find a normal-looking living room, and their eldest child cowering under a blanket on the couch. But this time, they did not assume it was just the boy's imagination. By now, it had been 7 months since the family first moved the bunk bed into Tessa's room. Alan had reached his breaking point. Furious and fed up, he began shouting and challenging the entity.
I started yelling on the top of my voice. I said, "What's ever in their house, would you please leave my children alone? And if you want to fight with me."
When the spirit gave no response, the family believed that perhaps the worst was over. They were wrong. Weeks later, on January 7th, 1988, Alan was returning home from working the late shift. He pulled into his driveway at about 2 a.m. As he approached the garage, he heard a strange, eerie, howling sound. He stopped in his tracks and turned to investigate the garage.
It was a real strong howling of wind, but it was quiet outside. And a voice came out of the howling and it says, "Come here." I ran around the sides of the house looking to see if anybody was there, and I couldn't see nothing. So I went back to the house steps, and the vacuum of the wind started up again. It started out real soft, and it got real loud. And the voice said, "Come here," and it just kept on saying, "Come here, come here." And I focused onto the garage door, and I seen a glow.
When Alan turned back to look at the garage, he saw that it was engulfed in flames.
And I run. I got scared and I ran. And I ran to the house and I opened the door and I set my lunch pail on the floor. I locked the door and I stood there for a brief couple of seconds and I says, "Oh my God, my garage is on fire." And I ran back out on the porch and I looked towards the garage and there was nothing. The garage was just as normal as when I came home from work. So I quick went back in the house and I closed the door and deadbolted the door and locked the door. After I had the door locked, I reached down to pick up my lunch pail, and this thing hurtled it right through the living room.
Alan awoke Debbie as he ran into the room, excited and terrified by the events of the evening. But the house seemed to be at peace now, and eventually Alan was able to fall asleep. Soon after, in an effort to calm his daughter's fears and assure their safety, Alan began sleeping on the floor of the girls' bedroom. One night, the entity returned.
I started to see this fog starting to appear on the floor. And a voice came out of it, and it says, "You're dead."
And so Pastor Wayne was called again to visit once more with the Tallmans.
When I arrived, Alan was very frightened. He was shaking. He was visibly shaken at what he had seen. Alan gave me no indication at all that he was in any way fabricating what he was telling me. And my sense of that was heightened by the fact that I'd been with people before who had described things similar to what Alan was describing. And his fear and terror at what he had seen was very similar to what I had seen before.
Days later, Alan was again scheduled to work the late shift, so he asked a relative to stay with his daughters in their room until they fell asleep. Alan had told the relative about the entity and the threat that it had made. But the relative did not believe in the supernatural and said he was not afraid.
You will be. You will be.
That night, the burning witch appeared to the unnamed relative, causing him to scream and awaken Debbie.
The relative came out of the bedroom, and I said, "What happened?" And he was scared. I said, "Where's the baby?" He goes, "Back in the bedroom." I said, "Get her." I said, "We are leaving this house." I said, "I am never coming back to this house." I said, "I don't care." I said, "I have had it. I can't handle this no more."
Frantically, Debbie, the children, and the unnamed relative grabbed some belongings and fled the house in terror. Debbie vowed she would never walk through its door again. The Tallmans believed that the entity that invaded their home was somehow tied to those bunk beds. After all, they reasoned, the family had lived in peace until the day they had brought those bunk beds home. 2 weeks after fleeing their home, the Tallmans brought the bunk beds to a dump and had it bulldozed and buried so it could never harm another family again. The Tallmans left Horicon and their haunted house behind them. They settled into a new home miles away.
After we left the house, everybody asked us, "Can this follow you?" I never thought it could happen the first time. So I don't know if this is the end of the story.
On January 25th, weeks after the family had left the home, Pastor Wayne decided that he wanted to return to the house to see if he could confront and remove whatever demonic entity inhabited it. But he didn't go alone. He was joined by Horicon Police Chief Doug Galman and 2 other officers. Chief Galman had spoken with the Tallman family, and though he did not believe in ghosts or demons, he did believe that at least the Tallmans believed that they had encountered supernatural evil. Pastor Wayne sought proof of the devil. Chief Galman sought proof of a hoax. Both men were disappointed when they discovered nothing out of the ordinary. Unsatisfied with the results of their investigation, Chief Galman decided to bring in some quote-unquote experts. He asked Dr. Don Mueller, the Associate Professor of Social Welfare at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, and an avid researcher/lecturer on the paranormal, as well as parapsychologist Carl Schuld and retired Professor Walter Uphoff, who had authored 2 books on the paranormal. He asked these men to join him once again inside the former Tallman home to investigate. The results of that investigation are unknown, but some pictures from it have recently been discovered by Allison Jornlin, formerly of MilwaukeeGhost.com. And I suppose that could be Jornlin, since we're in Milwaukee. I say formerly because if you attempt to go to that site now, it redirects you to a ghost tour site with no contact information for Allison listed. But you can see some of these pictures on the website cultofweird.com. The home was put up for sale in February of 1988. Quickly, rumors grew in the neighborhood of what caused the Tallmans to leave their home so suddenly, just after they had settled into it. Rumors of the haunting began to swirl, and it wasn't long before the story was oft repeated with wild exaggerations, like blood oozing from the ceiling, or a basement that contained a portal to hell. Some folk figured the best thing to do would be to burn the place down, just, for safety. Those kinds of suggestions caught the attention of Chief Galman. He asked the Tallmans to speak with the press so that they could finally tell their story and hush all the small-town gossip. they were put in touch with the producers of a new regular series which would be premiering later that year, a show called Unsolved Mysteries. By April of 1988, a new family had moved into the Tallmans' former home, and Unsolved Mysteries asked the new owners if they could use the actual house to film in and around to tell the Tallman story. The new owners agreed, but reported that they had observed no strange occurrences in their home. For their part, the Tallmans agreed to speak on Unsolved Mysteries. However, they would not use the real names of their children, and they would speak only in shadow to disguise their own identities. Also, they refused to participate in the reenactments, so Unsolved Mysteries hired regular local actors instead. As I mentioned before, the Tallman House story was featured on Unsolved Mysteries Season 1, Episode 4, which was a Halloween episode in which Robert Stack walked the decks of the Queen Mary. But since that episode was released on streaming platforms, the Tallman House segment is not included. During a Reddit AMA in 2017, the Unsolved Mysteries creators addressed the issue of stories being edited out of the original episodes, saying, quote, "We have legal staff that keeps track of the cases and make sure that we don't infringe on anyone's rights. Sometimes a statute of limitations of the case has passed, and we always try to be as respectful as we can to the people who were featured in the segments." So the reason why the Tallman story is missing from the streaming versions of Unsolved Mysteries remains a mystery. So what was really going on in the Tallmans' house? Well, perhaps it's exactly like Debbie and Alan said. They bought used children's furniture that just happened to be the home of a fire witch. Or perhaps Pastor Wayne was right and the devil was really behind it all. Or perhaps Debbie and Alan got in over their heads with a mortgage they couldn't afford and decided that a demonic haunting would be a neat excuse to break their loan agreement and, perhaps, land a book deal and a feature film adaptation. It should be noted that in several reports that I read, the Tallmans claimed that they were staying away from the press, and in fact they were hiding from the press. But of course they did allow their story to be part of the very first season of Unsolved Mysteries. I'll leave it to you to ponder. So that's the story of the Tallman House, the Tallman Haunting, the Burning Fire Witch. But listen, it's a short story, short and sweet, but it's got everything you need in there, and it actually would make a pretty good Hollywood movie, I think. You mean you have to fix up some of the details and kind of stretch out the story more and make it perhaps a little bit more life-threatening, even more than it appeared in that story. But I think that could be a good Hollywood movie in the style of the Amityville Horror or Poltergeist, something along those lines, which were two popular movies that happened to come out just a few years before this story broke on Unsolved Mysteries. So again, possible motivation, possible, for the family to create this story, or perhaps exaggerate a story that really did happen, or, like I said, maybe it's exactly like they said, and they bought cursed furniture. We can't say for sure. All right, friends, I hope you enjoyed this story. This is kind of like our regular scheduled Christmas story. I am going to be re-releasing an episode from the past, a Ghost of Christmas Past, with a regular Christmas ghost story on it in time for Christmas. So listen up later in the week, probably Christmas Eve or perhaps Christmas Eve. That episode will come out, and I hope you will enjoy that. Again, the best thing you can do to support the show is join the Patreon, patreon.com/witchfinder. And that really, I can't tell you how much I appreciate the folks that join, because I know that sometimes I'm a little off schedule with getting the episodes out, and the YouTube channel is a little spotty as well. And I really appreciate all the people that stick with me and support me just the same. And you can be one of those people. You can be a true blue spookaroo at patreon.com/witchfinder. And the other thing you can do for the show, of course, is share it with friends. Let people know that you listen to the show, that you enjoy it, and that you think they'll enjoy it, and that it's about spooky stuff. Maybe you're giving someone a new phone or a new iPad or whatever you kids give out these days, and you tell them, hey, you know what you should listen to on that thing? Spooky Times with Eric D. It's a wonderful podcast. Let me hook it up for you. Hit that subscribe button. And also, you can, of course, write a review, a kindly worded 5-star review on whatever platform you happen to be listening from. That would be much appreciated as well. I truly hope that you have a wonderful holiday season. This may or may not be the last episode of 2021. We will see. And then we will be on to 2020 Part 2. Well, let's hope it's not really that. 2022. We will see. But until then, don't be afraid.
Spooky Times is a Witchfinder production.